Hey everybody, Jason here from the Children's Museum, the ASTEAM Program Manager, here to talk to you a little bit about aerodynamics today. Today we're going to build a straw rocket or a straw glider. Very simple thing that we're going to build, but gives you the principles of aerodynamics very well. So first of all, what is aerodynamics? A lot of people think aerodynamics is the science of flight, if you will. It's really not the science of flight. It's the science of how air flows. And when we think of how air flows, when it's concerning aerodynamics, we think of how things fly in the air, like an airplane, a jet plane, a balloon, a glider, whatever else. So when you think about that stuff, it's okay to think of aerodynamics as a plane through the air, but it's really about how that plane is manipulating airflow, okay? And the most common way an airplane or a vehicle that flies manipulates airflow is through its airfoils or its wings. So you'll see that in action right now when we build a straw rocket. You also got to understand that there's four principles of flight. The four principles of flight is drag, lift, thrust, and gravity, okay? So we all kind of know what gravity is, right? Gravity is the force that pulls us towards the center of an object. The force that's pulling us to the center of the object on the planet Earth is the Earth itself. We are the smaller thing, a human being, than the Earth, so we're gravitationally pulled towards the center of the Earth. Same with the moon. The moon goes around the Earth because it's gravitationally being pulled by the Earth. On the same token, the sun, which is a much larger object, is pulling us around the sun because it has a stronger gravitational force. Lift and drag are interesting things. Lift is actually the principle of aerodynamics that is perpendicular to airflow, and drag is the principle of aerodynamics that is parallel to airflow. And finally, weight is usually taken as the force on an object due to gravity. Weight is measured by weight equals mass times gravity acceleration. That's why you don't weigh the same on different planets or on different moons. On the moon, our moon, you weigh 1/6 of what you weigh here because there's less gravitational acceleration. Your mass remains the same, but your weight changes. Your mass never changes, okay? So when you're thinking about aerodynamics, you're thinking about these relationships between weight, lift, drag, and thrust. Remember, weight is the force pulling you down with gravity. So in order to get into the air, lift has to overcome weight. Your thrust is what's moving you forward. So it could be your propeller, it can be your engine, or whatever else it can be, like the fuel being used to bring a balloon up, and that has to overcome the gravity. The gravity, again, is pulling you to the center of something. So when those are all in balance, you're going to do fine to get an airplane into the air. You have to remember also there is a relationship between drag and lift. Drag, again, is the force that is moving parallel with the airflow. Lift is the force that is moving perpendicular with the airflow. So when those are in balance as well, you'll have a steady, nice flight. Also coming into play are Newton's 3 laws of motion. Anything that moves are going to utilize the laws of motion, but they're really important to understand when you're talking about aerodynamics. The first law of motion, of course, is inertia. Inertia is basically stated as such. Anything that is in motion will remain in motion unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. So, in a way, the unbalanced forces of aerodynamics would be drag and gravity. It also can state that an object at rest will remain at rest until it is acted upon by an unbalanced force. In a way, you can talk about lift and thrust as being unbalanced forces that put an object into motion that flies. The second law of motion basically states a mathematical equation that's called F equals m times a. That means force equals mass times the acceleration. What that means is if you have a certain object with a certain mass, to accelerate it a certain amount to move that object has to equal the force you put upon it. So basically, if you have an object that's sort of large and an object that's sort of small, to move them the same distance or to accelerate them the same amount, the force would have to be different for both of them, but they would have to equal. So the mass of something times its acceleration has to equal the force given to it to make it move. The last law of motion states that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So for something to fly, you actually have to have an action that causes it to fly and the equal and opposite reaction to continue its flight. So basically, when you have a rocket blasting off into space, the reaction is the amount of fuel and the firing of the engines pushing up on the Earth, and then that pushing back to make the rocket accelerate into the air. So basically, you have to have an equal and opposite reaction for anything to move. Okay, that's a lot of things I just said, there's a lot of principles we just covered. Let's go ahead and make a glider so you can kind of see how these are working. To make your glider, all you're going to need is a straw, a bendy straw, and some address labels. Here's what you're going to do. Taking your straw, not your bendy straw, you're going to take one address label and you're going to go ahead and cover the top up like this. That's so you can blow into the straw and make it fly. Okay? Next, you want to make some wings for the straw, some airfoils. To make the wings is really easy. You just take the address label, you attach it where you want to attach it. I like to attach it to the back usually. You put it on one side, then you press the pieces together so they stick. And you want to make 3 of these. It just gives it a little bit more balance. It makes it fly a little better. So you see, you have a set of wings there. And you have a little top wing there. So it's like a little glider here. Okay? Now to make it fly, you have to give it a little bit of thrust. To throw this one is kind of hard. Okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to take your bendy straw. With the bendy side hanging out, you're going to insert it into your bigger straw. And then you're just going to blow on it to make it fly. Now it's not going to fly too far because the forces of drag and gravity will bring it down pretty quickly. But if you continue practicing, you might be able to get to go further and further as you go. Hey, and you never know, on a nice windy day, you might be able to make it go really far. So that's your glider for the day. Go ahead and make one and practice it out, and let us know how far you got to go.